Move to member statements. It would not be normal for me, members, to reference specific media reports from the Chair, but at the start of our business today, I want to acknowledge the important reporting by Darren Marshall and the BBC team last week in relation to the all too frequent abuse being faced by members. In particular, I want to thank all those members who spoke about their own experiences. While many of the tools to tackle these issues lie beyond the role of the Speaker and the Assembly Commission, I can inform members that there has been good proactive engagement with the PSNI, and we're also engaging with the Electoral Commission. But for today, I would want to encourage members to ensure that they report any threats or harassment that they receive to the police. It's important that we're going to recognise this problem of abuse and not accept it as a norm, which I know many of us have got used to. Let us move on. First item is member statements. Nicole Emishirin.
And I raised this afternoon to highlight the issue of the ETA, which the British Government has implemented since the beginning of the year, ahead of the broadening of the scope of this electronic authorisation scheme as of the 2nd of April, when European visitors are going to be required to submit this application before coming north. Since the 8th of January, all non-European international visitors have had to apply for an ETA before they can cross the border, and I've already had constituents coming to me with increasing anxiety around this. We're having B&B owners and self-catering accommodation outlets who normally would have their bookings for summer full at this stage in the year, seeing a massive decrease in numbers. I'm very, very concerned about the impact that this is going to have. We know that there's already a disparity north and south in terms of our tourism and hospitality sector, and this particular scheme is set to cause more chaos for our northern outlets. Added to the worry that our businesses feel is the fact that the price is increasing from £10 to £16 on the 9th of April, and it just feels like there's an onslaught on our tourism operators across the 6 counties. The reality, regardless of anyone's political affiliation or feelings around it, is that worldwide people do not understand the intricacies of the British border in Ireland, and the vast majority of international visitors see Ireland as one country and want to come to Antrim as much as they want to come to Galway or Donegal. The pubs in Mid-Ulster are every bit as good as the pubs in Galway. The beaches in the North Coast are every bit as nice as those further south. And we want to encourage the businesses that have for so long suffered and are only just now beginning to flourish to continue to do so. We know that 67% of those who visit northern destinations for tourism reasons do so via the border, because the vast majority of our international ports, airports and docks are located in the 26 counties, and so there is great hesitancy when people then are faced with this bureaucracy in order to come north. So we want to encourage our tourism sector and support that industry, and I would add my voice to those of Dr Joanne Stewart and others representing the industry in calling for the British Government to stop the implementation of this scheme and to rethink the damage that they're doing.
Mr Speaker, I rise today to raise awareness of a very important charity that supports individuals in Northern Ireland who have made immense sacrifices in service to our country, BLESMA, the Limbless Veterans Association. BLESMA is a national charity with a strong presence in Northern Ireland, providing lifelong support to veterans and serving personnel who have lost limbs or the use of limbs. Since its founding over 80 years ago, BLESMA has worked tirelessly to support those who have experienced life-changing injuries. Their work goes beyond physical rehabilitation, encompassing emotional and mental health support, advocacy and practical assistance for everyday living. The charity's efforts extend to ensuring that those affected by these injuries do not face their challenges alone. BLESMA offers a strong community where individuals who have experienced similar difficulties can connect, share experiences and find comfort and understanding. From supporting prosthetics to providing tailored rehabilitation, Blasma's impact in the lives of our service personnel and veterans is immeasurable. I want to particularly highlight the exceptional work that Blasma does in Northern Ireland, where our veterans, both young and old, benefit from the charity's services. They have worked tirelessly to ensure that no matter the injury, every individual receives the care and support they need to rebuild their lives with dignity and hope. On Friday of last week, it was my pleasure to host a fundraising coffee morning in support of the vital work carried out by Blasma, and I was delighted to see so many Blasma veterans, members of the public and colleagues in attendance. I would urge all members of the Assembly to familiarise themselves with the invaluable contribution that Blasma makes, not only in Northern Ireland but across the United Kingdom, and support them as best possible, whether through volunteering, fundraising, or simply spreading awareness. We can all play a role in supporting these brave men and women who have given so much for our safety and freedom. Let us show our gratitude, respect and support for Blasma and the veterans it serves. Together we can ensure that they are not forgotten and their sacrifices are never overlooked. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John Hagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Thursday, I attended the launch of the Girl Guiding Girls' Attitude Survey report alongside Justice Minister Naomi Long. This report underlines that girls face a crisis of confidence in an unequal world. Girl Guiding plays a vital role in the lives of young girls across the UK, giving them a voice and community to ensure they grow into women who know they matter. I recently visited Lorna Estate, the hub of Girl Guiding in Northern Ireland, where I learnt more about the brilliant work they undertake. There are thousands of local groups, UK-wide, run by volunteers, coming every week to inspire and nurture the next generation. I'm sure every woman in this chamber today knows the feeling of being treated differently just because they are a woman, being looked at differently, being seen differently, and being talked to like they are less than. What this report on girls' attitudes encapsulates, however, is how young that feeling can begin. It's startling, but unfortunately not shocking. It was reported that 3 in 4 girls aged 11 to 16 see or experience sexism, and this increases to 95% for young women aged 17 to 21. 69% of girls aged 7 to 10 feel like they're expected to behave differently because they're a girl. Over 1 in 5 girls aged 7 to 10 have seen rude images online. This has doubled since 2021. Half of girls surveyed feel anxious about their future. 57% of 11 to 21-year-olds are worried about not having a secure income or being able to afford a home in the future. This data reflects the sad reality of what I hear from my own young constituents in North Down and across Northern Ireland, and why the work of the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategic framework is so vital. Everyone across our society has a role to play in eradicating misogyny and changing the prevalent culture of sexism that still exists to this day. However, it is not all so bleak. When these girls were asked about what they want the future to look like, they talked about regulation of social media companies, protecting nature, curriculum change, more money, better houses and jobs, and communities of welcome and acceptance. They talked about a future where equality and equity played a key role in any society. I want to thank Girl Guiding Ulster for inviting me to their launch and for undertaking this vital work. We must not lose momentum on tackling violence against women and girls and gender inequality. We must do better for these girls, for girls all around the world who find themselves at risk, just because of their gender. Thank you.
John Stewart.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Carrickfergus Rugby Club Junior Shield Champions 2025 has a lovely ring to it, Mr. Speaker, and following my best wishes to them last week, I'm very proud to stand here today and congratulate them on an excellent success. I had the privilege, Mr. Speaker, of being at Ravenhill on Saturday for a fantastic game of rugby when Carrick triumphed 17-13 over Ards in a roller coaster game. I'd like to commiserate with Ards and their supporters. They fought hard on the pitch and sung hard off it, but thankfully Carrick came up trumps. So to all the Carrick players, just to congratulate them on a fantastic performance, delivering the first silverware to the club in 20 years, to the delight of the hundreds of travelling supporters who I know partied and celebrated into the wee small hours on Saturday and Sunday morning. Mr. Speaker, the sense of pride and buzz around the town in the build-up to this, on the back of the victory, has been really impressive to see, and I want to congratulate and salute everyone associated with the club for all they've done. It's also really inspiring to the many young players who are watching on and seeing just what can be done and what they can strive for. So to our captain, Conor Cambridge, man of the match, Matty Hayden, and the entire team, I want to congratulate them all on a very special win and for putting Carrickfergus back on the rugby map. Not to be outdone as well, Mr. Speaker, Carrickfergus under-18s also shared the under-18 bowl trophy on Saturday, drawing 12-12 with Omer Clocker Valley, which was also very great to see. I know they'd love to have been at the final to watch the first 15, but they didn't want to be outdone and came home with silverware as well. So it just shows that the future is bright among the youth at Carrickfergus Rugby Club as well, and we wish them all the rest for the rest of the season. Thank you very much.
Cheryl Brownlee.
Speaker, and I too stand to raise the fantastic achievements of Carrickfergus Rugby Club, and I don't think we can praise them too much for the fantastic achievements over the weekend. First, of course, the first 15 lifted the Junior Shield following their victory against Ards at the Kingspan Stadium on Saturday in a fiercely contested match. Carrick showed immense dedication, defence, strength and teamwork to secure a 17-13 win, bringing home their first silverware since 2016 and their first senior final at Ravenhill since 2002. In challenging conditions, the team displayed resilience, composure and standout performances from Ryan McGonigal, Matty Hayden and Finn McCormick alongside a full squad effort that saw them hold off a late Ards push. Their hard work throughout the season, of course, has truly paid off, and this victory is a testament to the club's commitment and passion for the game. Adding to the celebrations, of which there were many, Carrick's under-18s put in a fantastic performance in their under-18s bowl final, eventually sharing the trophy after a hard-fought 12-12 draw against Clocker Valley Oma at the Meadowbank Arena, a brilliant achievement for the club's rising stars. But this success is not just about the players on the field. It's a reflection on the coaches, the volunteers and the loyal supporters who continue to drive the club forward. Carrickfergus Rugby Club has a rich history and a strong community, and this latest triumph is a proud moment in their journey. It has been a pleasure to work closely with the club in recent years, supporting their work to improve their facilities at their home ground and increase their community outreach and engagement across the whole East Antrim area. With the McRae Cup semi-final still to come, there's even more to look forward to, and probably 2 more member statements on the floor that morning as well. Congratulations once again to Carrickfergus Rugby Club, a club built on passion, resilience and an unbreakable team spirit. Well done.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to shine a spotlight on water sports and the reliance on clean water. Water sports have always been popular, but interest and participation really took off over the COVID pandemic. And I understand this not just as a participant, but as someone who used to work as an instructor and really did a lot to try and encourage people onto our waterways. There are now over 300,000 people who participate in some form of water sports on our lakes, rivers and seas. 6 out of our 7 medals at the 2024 Olympics came from water sports. The many benefits of water sports are well understood. The impact that water quality is having in these sports may be less well known. We may know a lot about the environmental impacts, we may know a lot about the economic impacts, but certainly the societal impacts that our poor water quality is having maybe is slightly less amplified. Lakes, rivers and seas do for water sports what pitches, halls and courts do for our traditional sports. They're absolutely essential playgrounds for these sports, but they are not reliably available in the way other sports facilities are. Some of this disruption is inevitable, but increasingly man-made pollution is curtailing participation in these water sports. NI Water has nearly 2,500 storm overflows, which spill 220 million tonnes of untreated sewage and wastewater into our waterways every year. 4 out of 10 overflows are classified as unsatisfactory, which means they discharge much more frequently than they should. As a result of these discharges and other sources of pollution, none of our rivers or lakes have good overall water quality. For water sports, this means that events are being cancelled, postponed or moved more and more often. In some cases, participants become ill. Angling, triathlon, paddling, canoeing, open water swimming, sailing, windsurfing and rowing are all some of the sports that have reported these negative effects. I am pleased to be able to sponsor an event by the Clean Water Sports Alliance this Wednesday, and I would encourage other members to come and hear about the impact pollution is having on sports across Northern Ireland. And in the conclusion, and to paraphrase what I've said here before, as what Ratty said to Mole, there's nothing quite so much fun as messing about on the water. So thank you, Chair.
Sinead McLaughlin.
Mr. Speaker, I arise to speak once again about what is happening with rail provision in the North West. It is not a misunderstanding, it is not an oversight, it is a deliberate and sustained act of regional discrimination. For years now, Derry, the second city in Northern Ireland, along with Castle Rock and Ballerina, have been treated as second class when it comes to rail services. Let me give you the facts again. Every station east of Coleraine gets 13 Sunday trains in each direction, essentially a service every hour, while stations west of Coleraine just get 6, a train every 2 hours. That's just not unfair, it's absolutely absurd. Only one train from Derry reaches Belfast before 9 a.m. on weekdays. This is a complete failure of public transport planning, and it cripples opportunity for workers, for students and for the wider regional economy. The last train from Belfast to Derry is at 9:10 in the evening, and on Sundays, even worse, at 7:10. After that, passengers to the North West are cut off. This is not due to tunnels nor trains. It is not down to technical limitations. This is a political decision, rooted in outdated thinking and tolerated for far too long. In fact, these 3 stations, Derry, Castle Rock and Ballerina, each receives 2,400 fewer services per year than their eastern counterparts. Over 1 million fewer seats for a city trying to grow its university, attract businesses and retain young people. And for what? We're told the cost to fix it is in the region of 1.5 million a year, barely a footnote in that departmental budget. That works out at less than 8p per rail journey across the network, a tiny price to pay to end a glaring inequality that has persisted since 2017. Let's not forget this affects more than commuters. With the growing university in Magree already facing shortage of accommodation, many students are now commuting into Derry, and yet only one train reaches the city by 9 a.m. That's unacceptable. And with major events like the Open of Portrush this summer, the failure to provide proper Sunday services west of the Ban will once again undermine Derry and the wider North West as destination for visitors, investment and for growth. Mr. Speaker, this is no longer a quiet policy flaw. It's a loud message to the people of the North West that we are not seen, we are not prioritised and we are not treated equally. Thank you.
Peter Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a couple of weeks ago I met with Nicola Armstrong, the Northern Ireland lead for Beat Eating Disorders, a charity doing great work shedding light on the obstacles faced by those who are affected by this illness. I was struck by how many people are affected, 1 in 50 across the UK, and eating disorders. Anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa have the highest mortality rates amongst all psychiatric disorders. Sadly, far too many people living with this illness feel misunderstood when describing their situation or are just put off talking about it at all. The stigma is then deepened when we consider how difficult it is for people to access treatment they need in Northern Ireland. There are currently no trusts providing intensive community and day treatment services for both children and adults. But, Mr. Speaker, what I am most concerned about is the impact on our children and young people, especially young girls. The impact of social media, the instant accessibility of communication is feeding into a very unhealthy culture of body image sensitivity and what it means to be seen as attractive to the opposite sex. This issue is personal to me, as for many years I supported a young girl called Mary Barr with this illness. I watched alongside her mum and wider family as Mary deteriorated to the point where, due to severe lack of potassium, she nearly died twice due to cardiac arrest. She was sent to centres in England and Scotland because there was no specialised inpatient day or daycare suitable for her in Northern Ireland. For a substantial time, the clinical support she received was, in my view, patchy at best. and I feel this has to change in the future. Mary made it. She beat the illness and is now supporting other young girls battling their demons in the role of an expert by experience. And she's getting married to Sam in a couple of years. However, this morning I would strongly urge the Health Minister to progress the clinically specific recommendations of the mental health strategy to ensure that people with eating disorders receive the support that they need and the help they very much deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Jerry Carl.
Fair to say that I and many others didn't expect much from this Labour government, the bar being set so low because of how awful the previous Conservative administrations were. However, I and many others didn't believe that things would be this appallingly bad so quickly. Not even a year in this administration, and look at the havoc that they have wrought. And in case anyone really believed that the Labour government's cuts to welfare were driven by a genuine desire to support more people back into work, last week's spring statement burst that bubble. The OBR told the Chancellor she did her sums wrong. She had to scramble back to the drawing board to find more cuts in order to meet her self-imposed fiscal rules. £500 million of those cuts were found once again from the pockets of sick and disabled people. Proof, as if it were needed, that this was never about supporting people into work. A majority of people on social security are actually in work and need the support to top up their poverty wages. Many disabled people, Mr. Speaker, rely on PIP to stay in work. These cuts were only ever about saving money and satisfying the British ruling class. The government's own analysis predicts that there will be an extra 250,000 people, 250,000 people, including 50,000 children living in relative poverty by 2030 as a direct result of these benefit cuts. We're witnessing Labour's attempts to create a moral panic about benefits spending. They have pointed the finger in all directions, blaming individuals for taking advantage of the system, blaming clinical professionals for overdiagnosing mental health conditions, blaming the Tories for maxing out the national credit card. This Labour government seems incapable of acknowledging the human cost of 15 years of austerity, 15 years of neglect and the privatisation of our public services. They want to continue the pain. Health waiting lists spiralling out of control, school buildings crumbling and the homelessness crisis tearing apart working class communities. And is it any wonder more people are sick and poor? Many sick and disabled people are rightly worried that cuts to PIP and universal credit mark not only the dismantling of the welfare state but a return to austerity. And we can see, Mr. Speaker, classic red flags of austerity throughout last week's spring statement. Decreases in day-to-day government spending, 10,000 civil service job losses and cuts to administrative spending for public services. All the while, defence spending will increase by another £2.2 billion. Austerity is back with a red rosette, and it's a foolish economic policy to the response of Trump's tariffs in Europe. Austerity is, Mr. Speaker, a deadly political ideology that we must oppose at every turn. And it's worth asking the question, what is the Communities Minister and his party focusing on in this period? They're focusing on bilingual signage. They should grow a spine and actually lead a fight against these disgraceful and deadly cuts against our communities. It's time to get the priorities right. We need to demand there should be money for welfare, not warfare. Thank you.
David Honeyford.
Mr. Speaker, in 2025, the fact that female sport remains much smaller in numbers, in funding, a lack of facilities, and there remains a continued barrier to participation growth across a range of sports is a disgrace. I recently addressed this issue at our Alliance Party conference with Molly Davis from Ulster Rugby, and we highlighted as a party the ability of sport to build on our party values of inclusivity, of equality and uniting our community and building a truly shared society. But despite these barriers in Lagan Valley, we've had some incredible success in recent days. And I want to give a massive shout out to two different teams and be a voice and a champion for their success and make sure there's always equality in this chamber. Firstly, we have had the success, and Wallace High School has had unbelievable success, your own school, Mr. Speaker, with the boys rugby team, but now the girls have backed that up, and the girls netball team has won the school senior cup final, which is a really fantastic achievement, and I want to pass my congratulations on to the girls and also to the coaching team and the teaching staff at Wallace. And then again yesterday we had the Lisburn ladies rugby team who secured the league championship. I have raised these girls before in this chamber, and I've loved watching their journey and supporting their journey and I've championed them as within and as a club as a whole. But now to be league champions is an incredible achievement, and it's absolutely amazing for the club. So well done to the girls, and again to their coaching team. The girls have added so much to the club as a whole, and it's so good to see Lisburn Rugby Club and the new club extension and the clubhouse building facilities to facilitate the girls within the club. And it's well underway, and it shows the commitment that the club is having to equality within there, and making sure the girls have the same facilities. And it's an important lesson to have right across. So I just want to wish both teams well and congratulate them both. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You reckon?
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. There was a 24-day time span from when our First Minister stated that she was incredulous that export credit scheme money would be used to help Talis build air defence missiles for Ukraine in its fight against Putin, and her statement last week on UK defence spending being, to quote, a macho agenda of militarisation. Mr. Speaker, in that 24-day period, Putin's armed forces have conducted 1,318 attacks by drones, ballistic missiles and glide bombs on Ukraine's infrastructure. The attacks include power stations, factories, schools, hospitals, apartment blocks, and just about anything else Russians designated as a target. At the same time, there were over 800 incidents of heavy shelling and well over 1,200 engagements between the Russian and Ukrainian armies. Remarkably, with this intense bombardment, the Ukrainians managed to beat off or shoot down the majorities of these attacks. However, these attacks still resulted in over 95 civilian deaths and 2 or 3 times that number of casualties. Even as we speak, somewhere over the Ukraine, the wail of air raid sirens is going off, along with alerts across the Ukrainian civil population's mobile phone apps. The reason why the casualty figures are not worse, or that Russia hasn't occupied Odessa or Kiev, is because the Ukrainians have been able to make use of defensive weapons, many of which I am proud to say were made here in Belfast. That, Mr. Speaker, is something we should all be proud of. Putin and his apologists have stated that they have no alternative to their invasion of the Ukraine. He states he has legitimate right to use force in flagrant breach of territorial sovereignty and international norms. The First Minister says she believes in diplomacy, but a diplomacy that is Trumpian in its terms and would deny President Zelensky the means to secure Ukraine's peace. The hypocrisy of the First Minister's remarks are bad enough from a political leader who has no qualms about saying there was no alternative to the murderous and genocidal campaign of the Provisional IRA. But more worryingly, she attempts to speak on behalf of the people of Northern Ireland as a political leader about events on the other side of Europe. Mr. Speaker, she does not do that in my name, or in the name of the majority of our people who will rightly stand up for Ukraine and our support for their fight. And as an avowed apologist for the IRA campaign, she is entitled to speak as the Deputy Leader of Sinn Féin. She is not, however, as First Minister for all, entitled to represent the views of Northern Ireland in her appeasement of Putin. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Maurice Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to congratulate the staff and inmates at McGilligan Prison as they marked a very special milestone recently. Both of us are familiar with the weekly park runs that take place all over the world, and recently on a Saturday morning, McGilligan Prison marked its 250th park run. I believe that McGilligan's Lower Drumman's Park Run is the only park run inside a prison in Northern Ireland, and only the second to be established in the UK. In January, Lower Drumman's celebrated their 7th anniversary, followed by their 250th event. Over 200 inmates have taken part. Inmates also cover all the roles within Park Run: timers, scanners and tail walkers. I know there is a clear link between physical and mental health contributing to reducing reoffending. Very well done to all involved, and I would encourage all concerned to keep up the good work, and congratulations on both significant milestones. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Timothy Gaston, you have a couple of minutes, Timothy.
Mr. Speaker, last Tuesday I lodged a petition in the Assembly Business Office to refer Minister Kimmon's divisive move to the Executive and subject it to a cross-community vote. In order for that petition to be successful, it requires 29 other names. I know Minister Kimmins' decision has caused significant unease amongst other unionist MLAs. I welcome the statement by Deborah Erskine, which correctly described it as controversial last week. I also welcome the announcement by Gavin Robinson that a marker is to be put down on this issue. I know that there are MLAs who recognise that the community of Sandy Row have already been treated like dirt when it came to the road closures in that area to facilitate the building of the station. But words are not enough. It's time for unionism to unitedly take a stand for the Loyalists and Unionists of South Belfast. I'm not precious about how this is done. Whether it is stopped by way of the petition I lodged or by way of the Unionist ministers calling it into the executive and blocking it, I simply do not care. Mr. Speaker, if, however, this issue exposes that Richard Bullock was correct in his article of July 2020, which warned the Executive Committee Functions Bill will significantly weaken the ability of Unionists to stop Republican ministers going on solo runs, then this whole basis for devolution is once again called into question.
Thank you. That concludes members' statements. Members, the next item of business is a motion to approve a draft statutory rule. I will ask the clerk to read the motion.
That the draft recognition of professional qualifications and implementation of international recognition agreements, amendment, extension to Switzerland, etc., regulations Northern Ireland 2025 be approved.
Thank you. Call the Minister to move the motion.
Moved.
Thank you, Minister. The Business Committee has agreed that there should be no time limit on this debate, and I now call the Minister to open the debate on the motion. Minister.
These regulations before us today give effect to an agreement on the recognition of professional qualifications that the UK and Switzerland signed in June 2023 in relation to the legal profession here. Supporting regulations have been made in Westminster for a variety of professions. The British Government's regulations place a duty on the Law Society and the Bar Council here to recognise comparable Swiss professional qualifications and provide them with the necessary legal powers to do so. They do not, though, make certain required changes to our local legislation, the 1976 Solicitor's Order, hence the need for the Department to make these regulations. This ensures a smooth and transparent system for Swiss legal professionals to have their qualifications recognised, providing certainty for those wanting to work here. It is, of course, worth noting there have been no applications from Swiss lawyers to work here during the last 5 years, and it is not expected to be a sudden influx arising from this agreement. In parallel, Switzerland has passed legislation requiring Swiss regulators to recognise our qualifications, meaning professionals from here also benefit from reduced barriers to working in Switzerland. I am using powers contained in Section 3.1, 3.2 and 13.1 of the Professional Qualifications Act 2022 to make these regulations. The Act's powers were first used in December 2023 when the British Government implemented the recognition of professional qualifications provisions of the UK's free trade agreement with Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein. Through the recognition of professional qualifications and implementation of international recognition agreements, Amendment Regulations 2023, I will hereafter refer to these as the EFTA regulations. The provisions under the agreement are very similar to those in the UK's free trade agreement with Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein, with Switzerland since added as a specified state to the EFTA regulations. The regulations subject to the Assembly's affirmation will come into force tomorrow, the 1st of April. I will now outline the regulations giving effect to the agreement. They place a legal duty on regulators, in this instance the Law Society and the Bar Council, to recognise comparable Swiss qualifications relating to the legal profession. They are prescribed that the procedure that regulators must follow in recognising Swiss qualifications. They enable regulators to refuse to recognise Swiss professional qualifications where certain conditions are not met. They prescribe compensatory measures which regulators can require a Swiss professional to take in certain circumstances, such as completing an adaptation period. They amend sectoral legislation to enable regulators to meet those requirements, which they do not currently have the power to do so. I'd like to assure the Assembly that under these regulations it remains the responsibility of the regulators to set standards for their profession and decide who meets those standards. Regulators will need to decide whether a qualification from Switzerland is comparable to our qualifications and can refuse to recognise the qualification where certain conditions are not met. They can prescribe compensatory measures that a professional can be required to make. In accordance with the statutory duty under Section 15 of the Professional Qualifications Act, Whitehall Department of Business and Trade carefully consulted regulators about the implementation of this agreement. A formal consultation ran from February to April 2024 and sought views on the implementation approach and the regulations themselves. Respondents were supportive. DPT also consulted with devolved administrations in 2024, including here, in accordance with the statutory duty under Section 17 of the Professional Qualifications Act 2022. A response to this consultation was published on gov.uk. My officials had further engaged with the Law Society and Bar Council here before our draft regulations were developed and laid in the Assembly. To conclude, these regulations bring into effect the recognition of professional qualification systems contained in the agreement as they relate to the legal profession here. They ensure we are meeting obligations under international law and provide certainty for regulators and professionals now the provision in the Swiss Citizens' Rights Amendment have expired. It also means that qualified professionals from here looking to practice in Switzerland continue to have access to a streamlined recognition process. I commend these regulations to the Assembly.
Thank you, Minister. I now call the Deputy Chair of the Finance Committee, Diane Forsyth.
Mr Deputy Speaker, in the absence of Matthew O'Toole, the Chair, on paternity leave, I will speak on the Committee for Finance's scrutiny of the statutory rule, and I thank the Minister for his comments. The Committee has considered this statutory rule to implement the agreement between the UK and the Swiss Confederation on recognition of professional qualifications insofar as they relate to the legal profession in Northern Ireland. This agreement requires the UK and Switzerland to recognise comparable professional qualifications or experience obtained in each state. The policy proposal in the form of the SL1 letter was considered first by the Committee at its meeting on the 15th of January. Members noted the Department's consultation with both the Law Society and Bar Council. The Department indicated that the Law Society subsequently notified its willingness to implement the agreement should the Department require it. Members confirmed they were content with the policy proposal brought forward by the Department subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. The original statutory rule was laid to the Business Office on the 24th of January as SR 2025-10. However, following discussions with the Examiner of Statutory Rules, the statutory rule was laid again due to a technical error identified in the procedure used to lay and make the rule, for which the Department apologised. The revised statutory rule was laid with the Business Office on the 10th of March as SR 2025/0000 and considered at the committee meeting of the 26th of March, with the Department confirming there had been no changes to the policy content with the revised statutory rule. At that meeting, and as is usual practice, the committee noted assurances provided by the Department in relation to the position in Great Britain, regulatory impact and financial impact. The Examiner of Statutory Rules reported on the revised rule and had no objection. Mr Deputy Speaker, there was committee consensus to support the statutory rule, and the committee agreed to recommend that the SR be affirmed by the Assembly. Therefore, the Committee for Finance supports the motion to affirm.
Thank you. I call Padraig Clark.
The mutual recognition of comparable qualifications is a welcome step which provides people with the opportunity to move to other countries and be able to gain employment through the skills and experience that they have developed. These specific regulations will enable those who have received legal qualifications in Switzerland to have them recognised here and enhance an already strong and talented legal profession in the North. It is also important to highlight that this is part of implementing an overall agreement which will ensure that citizens here can have their professional qualifications recognised should they seek employment in Switzerland. It's important to note that mutual agreements and memoranda of understanding have been critical in supporting Irish citizens, both those at home impacted by Brexit and those studying or working abroad who wish to have their qualifications recognised at home. QQI, the Quality and Qualifications Ireland, the national awarding body for further education in the South, published detailed comparisons in 2019, noting the impact of ending the mutual recognition of qualifications directive in the North following Brexit. Thankfully, many of those negative consequences have now been curbed by memoranda of understanding and MOUs between North and South. There is still a lot of work to do in achieving full recognition and accreditation for physiotherapists and for other allied health professionals, as well as for teachers who have completed placements and who have studied abroad. My constituency office works to support many professionals who have taken up posts in the South, and also many teachers who have studied abroad and want to return to Ireland, having to navigate an unnecessarily bureaucratic process. I don't need to tell anyone here today how valuable these professions are and how critical it is that mutual recognition of qualifications is achieved to support and to grow our workforce with a diversity of skills, of talent and of experience. It's pivotal, therefore, that we have a united voice today to support other professional bodies towards achieving this mutual recognition and understanding. I therefore welcome the opportunity that this provides for our citizens and for those who can come here to join the workforce and to make a valuable contribution to our local economy.
Thank you. I now call on the Finance Minister to conclude and wind up the debate on the motion.
I didn't detect any voices who were against the recommendations or the regulations before us today. I think everyone sees the value of passing these regulations and the common recognition of qualifications, in this case the legal profession, between Switzerland and here, and I have nothing further to add other than to commend the regulations to the Assembly.
Minister, thank you for that response. Members, so the question is that the draft recognition of professional qualifications and implementation of international recognition agreements, amendment, extension to Switzerland, etc. regulations NI 2025 be approved. All those in favour say aye. Contrary no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. That takes us to the next item on the order paper, which is a motion on house building on public land, and I will ask the clerk to read the motion.
That this Assembly recognises the critical role of social and affordable housing in reducing housing need, supporting communities and strengthening the economy. Notes the Department for Communities' commitment to deliver at least 33,000 social homes under the Housing Supply Strategy. Acknowledges the need to secure suitable land for house building to meet this goal. Recognises the potential of utilising public land to increase the supply of social and affordable housing, and calls on the Minister for Communities to establish a public land agency to maximise the use of public land for the delivery of sustainable and affordable housing to help meet the Housing Supply Strategy targets.
Thank you. I call Mark Durkin to move the motion. Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 1 hour 30 minutes for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 10 minutes to propose and 10 minutes to wind. All other speakers will have 5 minutes. Please open the debate on the motion. Mr. Durkin.
Housing is a fundamental right. It is the foundation upon which people build their lives, communities and futures. Yet across Northern Ireland, thousands of families remain in desperate need of a home, while publicly owned land lies idle. I propose today's motion, which provides a common sense solution that will help tackle our housing crisis head on. A public land agency would ensure that publicly owned land is strategically identified and used efficiently to deliver much needed social and affordable homes, rather than gathering dust and growing weeds at a huge cost to the taxpayer and a huge opportunity cost to this executive. The Department for Communities has set an ambitious target to deliver at least 33,000 social homes under the housing supply strategy. Yet social housing build targets are constantly being missed. With just 7,000 social homes built in the last 5 years, there's no realistic path to achieving 33,000 over the next 15 years without proper funding and fresh ideas. The SDLP's recently published Building Firm Foundations outlines some practical solutions, such as a public land agency to make better use of public land. It's both baffling and disappointing that the parties in power are failing to engage in this type of thinking. That said, we do welcome the introduction of the intermediate rent model as a step in the right direction. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that we need to see more of, and there are more positives in terms of the funding allocated just recently to co-ownership as well. But we need more. Our figures show that between 68,000 and 136,000 homes could be built if we used just 10 to 20% of public land. We have 11,000 hectares at our disposal. That's not including DERA land, given that much of it will be forestry and unusable or unsuitable for housing, nor is it including council land. So we do need to ensure that that land is suitable for development, but these aren't pie-in-the-sky numbers. They're based on a pragmatic assessment of the land at our disposal in consultation with the housing and construction sectors. Even under a more modest scenario, if we were to build 50% of all new and social housing stock, say 1,300 homes per year could be delivered using public land alone. That is a transformative opportunity to build more homes faster and cheaper. And as I said, this doesn't even include land owned by councils, meaning that the total land we are given is conservative in its estimate. Currently, land acquisition typically accounts for around 30% of the cost of building social housing. So if we can cut out the cost of that land money for housing, the money that we do have for it can go 30% further. The number of houses that we build on it can be 30% more. That's hundreds of millions of pounds in public money that can be reinvested in construction rather than spent competing in a broken market. Making strategic use of public land could be a game changer, delivering better value for public money and ensuring that more homes are built where they are needed. However, currently there is no single body responsible for coordinating the use of public land to meet housing need. While Land and Property Services track ownership, they don't play any sort of proactive role in ensuring that land is used to deliver homes. And that's where our proposal for a public land agency comes in. A public land agency would act as a central coordinating body, identifying viable land, working across government departments and partnering with housing associations and developers to deliver homes at scale. It would take a delivery-focused approach, ensuring that our land is used in a way that maximises public benefit. And let's be clear, this isn't about just creating another layer of bureaucracy. The Land Development Agency in the Republic of Ireland provides a useful benchmark for set-up costs. Excluding borrowing powers, we estimate these at around €3 million per year, which would be money well spent considering what we currently spend maintaining disused land and empty buildings. And this brings me to another point. Over the last 3 years alone, government departments have spent over £5 million on maintaining empty land and buildings. And following assembly questions which I have tabled to every department, it also comes to light that an abandoned nuclear bunker in Ballymena has cost the executive over £300,000 in maintenance during that 3-year period. This facility, originally constructed during the Cold War era, has remained unused for decades, yet has become a black hole for public funds. And this is just one example of many. This is a scandalous waste of resources, particularly at a time when the number of families facing homelessness has skyrocketed. I'm not proposing that we use the bunker for social housing, although it might be an area of high demand given the current global climate, but we do need clarity and will need to seek clarity from TEO on what their intentions are in keeping it and why they've spent so much money on it. To provide some context, during the 2023-24 period, when the Executive expressed concern over a dire budget that left it unable to allocate one penny for homelessness prevention, there appeared to be enough in the coffers to spend nearly £250,000 of public funds maintaining an underground bunker. It would appear that the Executive is more worried about preparing for an apocalypse that might never, and we hope never, arrives than helping people face the crisis that they have to live every day. Such expenditures highlight the urgent need for a public land agency to ensure that public assets are either repurposed effectively or disposed of responsibly, rather than allowing them to become financial liabilities. This is a gross misallocation of resources at a time when housing lists are growing, families are struggling, and homelessness remains on the rise. We can't afford to keep throwing money into maintaining derelict buildings while people sleep in cars, on sofas, or in overcrowded and completely unsuitable temporary accommodation. Last year alone, as we covered, and there was an Audit Office report published last week, £39 million was spent on temporary emergency accommodation, yet the Executive have struggled to find funding for social housing. Maybe, just maybe, if we spent money more strategically and wisely, we could get out of this costly cycle. I do welcome the announcement from the Housing Executive last week that they intend to build 600 units specifically for temporary housing, and I think what better place or way to deliver on that ambition than by utilising public land to do so and ensuring that they get, and we all get, a bigger bang for our buck. As a constructive opposition, the SDLP is committed to tackling the housing emergency and delivering real change. We were elected to provide firm foundations for our constituents and communities, and I have faith that everyone here today shares that goal. Right now, we have a real opportunity to make a real difference. By maximising the use of public land, we can cut through the bureaucracy, we can speed up house building, and we can meet the housing supply targets. This motion is about solutions. We often get asked, what are our solutions? Here's just one. It's not about excuses. It's about using the assets that we already have to deliver for people, for communities, and for our economy. A home is more than just bricks and mortar. It's the foundation of security, stability, and opportunity. Housing is the foundation on which my party, the SDLP, was founded, why we stand here today. Let us all work together to ensure people have the opportunity to build that same foundation for themselves. Propose a motion.
Thank you. I call Colin Gildernew.
Last can call you, and I want to start by thanking the members for bringing this motion. Sinn Féin believes, last can call you, that housing is a human right. Everyone in our society, no matter what age or background they come from, should have access to a decent and affordable home of their own. A home is not just a roof over someone's head, it is fundamental to the well-being of each and every person in our society. And yet we still have so many people who do not have access to a decent, affordable home of their own which meets their needs. The simple fact is that we are not building enough homes. In fact, the number of housing completions hit a 60-year low in 2023. As we all know, a lack of housing supply pushes up house prices and rents to an unaffordable level for many people. The latest house price index statistics show that the average house price here in the north has reached a 17-year high, and average rents have increased by 56.4% over the last decade. The lack of housing supply is also having an impact on our ability to provide social housing to those in need. There are currently over 48,000 households on the social housing waiting list, which is the most there has ever been, with over 36,000 households living in housing stress. These figures are stark and underpin the urgent need to increase the supply of housing. The housing supply strategy sets an ambitious target of 100,000 new homes over the next 15 years. That is the scale of what's needed if we are to end the current housing crisis. However, unless we substantially increase the number of homes being built over the coming years, then we will certainly fail to meet that target. There are a number of very significant challenges which we must overcome if we are to deliver on that commitment. The first of these is funding. We have not seen an adequate level of investment in social housing for many years. Many of the challenges we face today stem directly from decades of underfunding by the British Government, and this is especially true when it comes to housing. I want today to welcome the allocation of 100 million of capital DEL within the 2025-26 budget for social housing. This significant investment provides a crucial foundation for increased new social housing provision and will go some way in addressing the urgent need for affordable homes. However, we need to see even greater levels of investment in social housing. We urgently need to see the revitalisation of the housing executive. This process, which was initiated by my party colleague Carol Killen, would see the housing executive have the ability to borrow finance which would unlock the potential for greater investment. I know last Ceann that Kiva Archibald, as Finance Minister, was continually pressing the British Government on this matter, and I am confident that the new Finance Minister will also be doing the same. The motion before us highlights another challenge which must be overcome, and that is the utilising of public land for social housing. I'm sure many of us here today can think of plots of land owned by the state in their own constituencies which could potentially be used for social housing but yet remain underutilised. The idea of creating a public land agency to ensure public land can be utilised in an appropriate way is something that Sinn Féin has called for in the past. In our document, A Home of Your Own, we called for the creation of an active land management agency in the 26 counties to ensure an adequate supply of public land for the purposes of building homes, while also maximising the public good that can be gained from state assets. Here in the north, Carol Killen, during her spell as Communities Minister, carried out an exercise to identify surplus public land that could be used for social housing. I'm also aware of great work being carried out by Belfast City Council, who have led the way in ensuring public land within their district is used for social housing.
Brian Kingston.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And most MLAs will say that housing is the #1 reason why constituents contact their offices, and certainly that is the case for my North Belfast office, in particular for people seeking social housing. We are all aware that housing supply is not keeping pace with demand, not just in Northern Ireland, but right across the United Kingdom and Ireland. So absolutely we need to increase housing supply across all tenures and across all parts of Northern Ireland. We have seen over recent months that this is a key commitment for the Northern Ireland Executive, with the publication of the 15-year housing supply strategy by the Communities Minister, Gordon Lyons, last December, and the inclusion of housing as one of the 9 priorities in the programme for government published at the start of this month, that priority being to provide more social, affordable and sustainable housing. Whilst the Minister for Communities has the greatest day-to-day responsibility for housing matters, it is appropriate that these are commitments for the Executive as a whole. Many departments and ministers have important roles to play in increasing housing supply, including the need to speed up our planning system, to ensure that the necessary infrastructure, in particular wastewater infrastructure, is in place, to ensure that the necessary finance is allocated, to ensure that suitable land is identified, and also that support services are provided for vulnerable people experiencing or at risk of homelessness due to various circumstances, including health and mental health issues, addiction, coming out of care and those coming out of prison. Transforming housing supply will require not only a collective response from the Executive, but also real collaboration from local government, community groups, the construction industry and financial bodies. Within the 3 years of our current programme for government, the Executive has committed to start work on at least 5,850 new build social homes. Within the 15 years of the housing supply strategy, the Executive aims to deliver at least 100,000 homes across all tenures by 2039, with 1/3 of these, around 33,000, to be social homes. The housing supply strategy has provided a framework for the actions required to increase supply and address the main barriers to supply here. This includes increasing land availability and improving our knowledge of public land that may be suitable for housing. The Democratic Unionist Party manifesto in 2024 outlined our desire to establish a UK-wide national database of public land. Not only will this help with housing, it would also ensure smaller businesses and the construction industry can identify future projects earlier. The use of public land will play an important role in supporting the development of affordable housing across Northern Ireland, and the previous Finance Minister advised that LPS has been developing a centrally held database, the Government Land and Property Register, the GLPR, to record all government-owned or occupied land and property assets in Northern Ireland. Within LPS, Ordnance Survey is providing information on publicly owned land and property for analysis to ascertain suitability for housing development. Therefore, we do not support the proposal in this motion that the Minister for Communities should establish a separate public land agency. As I have said, that work is already underway, and the GLPR under LPS and the Department for Finance will be an asset for the Executive as a whole. On wider issues, the DUP can point to a strong record of delivery in the Housing Ministry to increase supply, including introducing intermediate rent, increasing the upper property value limit for co-ownership, investing in housing stock, and removing intimidation points. First-time buyers are under extreme pressure when trying to secure a home. The Chartered Institute of Housing has advised that the number of new houses built here in 2023 to 24 was the lowest in a decade. That is impacting on the affordability of mortgages and depositors. There are clear challenges facing housing in Northern Ireland. However, the DUP and our Minister is tackling these issues head-on.
Call Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a housing crisis in Northern Ireland, and that housing crisis means that we have more children and more families and more individuals living in temporary accommodation in homelessness than ever before. The issue of building on public land in Northern Ireland is one of both opportunity and challenge. We know that the demand for public housing, infrastructure and public services continues to grow. Public land presents a potential solution, yet navigating the legal, environmental and planning framework remains a complex and at times frustrating process. Our planning system, governed by the Planning Act Northern Ireland 2011, requires rigorous assessments, particularly for developments on public land. This ensures proper land use, but it also leads to delays and uncertainty. Balancing economic growth with environmental protections under laws such as the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017 can slow projects considerably. Building on public land means balancing the needs of communities with the demands of developers. Public land is not just an asset, it belongs to the people. The Land Acquisition and Compensation Northern Ireland Order 1973 and other regulations ensure fair valuation and compensation, but they also create layers of bureaucracy that can complicate land transfers and approvals. Even when land is available, infrastructure constraints such as the limits placed on development by the capacity of wastewater, and we all know if all public land was made available right at this moment, most of it couldn't be developed because of the lack of wastewater underneath the ground. Limits also include roads and access to sustainable energy, and this can make development difficult. Public sector budgets are stretched and funding models often rely on private sector investment, which in turn requires clarity and confidence in land availability and planning timelines. I look forward to the Minister of Finance's review of the public estate that will identify what lands are surplus and may be available. The suitability of that land will need to be considered. For example, building homes in the middle of an industrial park with lack of access to services will not achieve our aims for building sustainable communities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we must ask, how do we streamline these processes while maintaining transparency and accountability? We need a conversation about planning reform, infrastructure investment, and ensuring that public land services service the public good. We must work across government, councils and stakeholders to unlock land for housing, green energy and essential services. This is not a challenge that we can ignore for those thousands of people who are homeless today in Northern Ireland, but it's one that we could address together. And I welcome further discussion on how we could move forward. And I'd like to thank the SDLP for raising this matter. I don't think it's an easy solution to come by because of all of the regulations that I've spoke about before, but we need to do more in order to meet the housing needs for Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you. Call Andy Allen.
When we talk about tens of thousands of people on our housing waiting lists, it's important to remember, as has been highlighted by other members and no doubt will be highlighted by the Minister, this is individuals, families, young and old people who are languishing on a housing system that's broken. Many of them are in despair that the housing system's not going to deliver for them and their families. We've older people in accommodation that is much larger than what they need, and indeed many of them, I've spoken to them myself, want to downsize, but the system does not support or enable them to do so, especially in the context of a cost of living crisis when we have individuals trying to heat homes larger than what they require. As has been highlighted, this is not a new crisis. It is one we've spoken about time and time again. But for those affected, every day without action feels like a lifetime. As we've heard so many times, this is people in desperate need of a place to call home. And while we welcome the Department's commitment to at least 33,000 social homes under the housing supply strategy, we need to be honest, is that enough? In a recent Communities Committee meeting, the Housing Executive provided a briefing detailing the need for 25,000 new social homes between the period 23 to 28, and the Minister knows I did raise this with him recently. That obviously is a 5-year period, whereas the housing supply strategy is 33,000 covering the period 24 to 39. And I'm not being dismissive of that. I appreciate that other members have highlighted that it is ambitious. It's much more than we're currently delivering, and it will deliver much more needed homes for those that we are striving to deliver for. But it would appear to be out of sync with the need. However, again, I do appreciate that this is against the context of the challenging budget landscape all of our departments are facing. But this debate rightly focuses on the need for delivery for those I've already highlighted and the many others in need of a home. An important component of that delivery is land. Land is not a technical detail, it is the foundation. Without land, nothing else happens. Which brings me to the crux of this motion, the call to establish a public land agency, and there appears to be differing views on that. An idea that we ourselves are not opposed to. And why do I say that? Well, the fundamental reality of it is we're not opposed to it for the simple fact that any proposal that will help bring us about and achieve that delivery for all of our people across Northern Ireland, we will not oppose. But there are fundamental questions that need to be asked. We've heard from Mr Kingston about the public land registry, but I've been a member of this House for almost 10 years, and that has fundamentally been a debate that we've heard for a long time. So where is it? Why does everything in this place work at a very, very slow pace? Where is that public land registry? So as I've said already, I'm happy to be supportive of the call for a public land registry. But the reality of it is this cannot just be another meaningless body. It needs to have teeth. It needs to have the ability to deliver, because the thousands of people on our housing waiting list don't care how we get about achieving the more homes that they need. They want to see us deliver it. And I do acknowledge steps that the Minister has taken over recent months in terms of co-ownership, intermediate rent and other initiatives, and that is against the context of the extremely difficult budget landscape that he faces. So happy to support the motion, and I look forward to hearing from the Minister as to what his thoughts on this is. And I do and would encourage him, if his department hasn't already done so, to look at international models. You know, there are models in Singapore, for example, there are models in Netherlands, there's models, for example, closer to home in London, and I'm sure there are a plethora of others. So it's important that we analyse, we assess those models that are operating in other jurisdictions, and I'm not for one moment suggesting that we can lift those and apply those directly, but there is important learning that we can perhaps take away from that. So happy to support the motion, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. And I call Ciara Ferguson.
Can I start by thanking the proposers of today's motion? Sinn Féin outlined the direction of travel which needs to be taken in respect of our housing back in November 2020, recognising that a good home is one which is affordable, secure and comfortable, is the very foundation for our children, our young people and our families' social, physical and mental well-being. Additionally, housing is fundamental to addressing some of our more pressing societal challenges, including tackling the root causes of poverty and inequality. Sinn Féin set in motion the wheels. We delivered the first draft housing supply strategy. We lobbied hard for strong housing commitments in the draft programme for government and delivered the Private Tenancy Act under Minister Hargey as a first phase of reforms to improve safety and sustainability of housing for our private renters. We are very pleased this motion echoes much of that which we have already said, that we need to see the urgent delivery of social and affordable housing at scale, and equally that we must work collectively across all government departments, arm's-length bodies and housing associations to utilise any available public land for the public good, for sustainable public housing. We also need to ensure that our housing arrangements that we move forward with knit into the wider regeneration plans to ensure we undo the defensive and segregated planning of the past, building thriving and connected communities. On Tuesday, the 25th of March, the Audit Office published its report on homelessness here, which noted that the numbers of households with homeless status here have increased by 80% within the past decade. Equally, spending on temporary accommodation provision here has increased by 408% from 2018-19 to 2023-24, equivalent to a spending increase of over 80% each year, to now stand at 38.6 million. I do, like others, want to welcome the recent announcement from the current Minister for Communities of financial support to enable the Housing Executive to purchase up to 200 properties per year over the next 3 years to reduce reliance on unstandard accommodation, on hotels and B&Bs. Such forms of accommodation are totally unacceptable as long-term living solutions and also comes at exorbitant cost. However, we do need to see much more innovative proposals around the investment plans to deliver never-before-seen levels of social and affordable housing and to improve existing stock, which is of low energy efficiency standard for hard-pressed homeowners and renters alike. We need to create affordable housing options through co-ownership, through intermediate rents and cooperative housing solutions. I would like to ask, what are the proposed plans to protect against the continued loss of our public housing stock, instead of being left in a cycle where one policy directly contradicts the other? I would also like to ask, what are the proposed plans in terms of timescale for delivering the Housing Executive's revitalisation project and multi-annual budgets here to protect our largest social housing landlord and support housing and homeless service organisations in charting the way forward with us all collectively, instead of constantly firefighting? I would also like to ask, what are the proposed plans to tackle unjustifiable rents, particularly in the private rental sector here, fundamental to ensuring, for example, that any increase in the local housing allowance might actually be to the benefit of our struggling renters? I suppose the truth of the matter is, as best outlined by John Franklin, the chief economist at Pro Bono Economics, we need to move beyond the sticking plaster solutions if we are to ever fix our broken housing system. Failing to do so keeps us all in an unsustainable merry-go-round of rising costs to manage an ever-growing homelessness crisis. We all know too well who this disproportionately affects: our working-class communities, our young people, those with additional complex needs, including mental health challenges, care leavers, and all those who find themselves pushed on the margins of society. I just want to finish by thanking those who have fought for better, from housing right activists, campaigners and organisations, to our vital homeless support services and frontline workers, including Homeless Connect as organisers of the Frontline Network, and to the wide range of housing rights and right-based organisations working to combat homelessness, poverty and inequality, and to support the many people struggling right now to find a suitable home. Thank you.
Thank you. Call Carla Killen.
Thank you, Lascan Collier. I mean, there are lots of figures, and the Minister probably has them all in his lengths to take, and they don't really change much, to be fair. Housing areas of worst housing stress have typically been North Belfast, West Belfast, Foyle, Newry, Armagh, and there are undoubtedly needs right across the board. But in my own constituency and Brian's constituency of North Belfast, they have remained persistently stubborn, and there are many reasons for that. I mean, the Housing Executive and the revitalisation of the Housing Executive, in conjunction with everything else, needs to happen at pace, and certainly more focus needs to be put in that. I would like to see the Housing Executive getting more land assembly powers to act almost in a way where they can look at the public land for public housing, take responsibility and ownership of that, as well as potentially getting other assets in order to build housing. It's not like, you know, where land is just kind of sitting by in certain areas, and it is in North Belfast, but it's in private ownership. And private developers are willing to go into partnership, but the obstacles that's put in front of them are horrendous. I mean, Kelly Armstrong touched on a point about NI Water. It's very, very suspicious, in my opinion, that areas that NI Water say they will hardly ever build on are areas are in highest need. So, for example, in North Belfast and Union Street, student managed accommodation of 780 units will go ahead with no opposition from NI Water. But if you're looking to build houses in the Crumlin Road or elsewhere, there's opposition to it. Why is that? So I'm quite suspicious of that, to be frank. And I also feel like, for example, over 4,000, over 4,500 people are on the housing waiting list for North Belfast. There's at least 3,800 of those living in housing stress. That, for me, is just hopelessness that we're passing on from one generation to another. You know, I'm dealing, and we're all dealing with families, but now getting into 3 and at times 4 generations living under one roof. Children have no access to privacy, nowhere to do their homework, nowhere to bring their friends home. It is absolutely horrendous, and I don't believe any minister wants that on their watch. I would not even anticipate that anybody wants that on their watch. But we do need to be more ambitious in the way we deal with this. Our housing, our local development plans and council could be one way. Belfast City Council have certainly led the way in terms of land, managing land that they have, and they're getting into hopefully get the development status. But the thing for me is the revitalisation of Housing Executive, and indeed, you know, Ciara pointed out the End and the Right to Buy scheme that's currently with housing associations but not in Housing Executive. I think we need to try and align that. I certainly would give way.
I thank the member for giving way and agree with much of what she said, particularly in terms of the Right to Buy scheme. But does the member recall, and she certainly will recall, when legislation was brought to end Right to Buy in housing associations, we had tabled an amendment at that time, the SDLP, to extend that also to the Housing Executive, and her party voted against that.
Well,
next minute.
I'll take the member's word for that. I can't remember the full amendment, but what I do remember is your party removed the ring fencing of houses in highest stress and highest need. So I don't think any of us can cover ourselves in glory. The point I'm making is, collectively, we're dealing with constituents who, in generations, are living with systemic housing stress, and it needs to end. And it can only end when there's full participation, including that from the collective. And no, I won't give way again, Mark, if you don't mind. And I know Colin will wind up. But I know even in terms of your opposition, you want the same thing. You want more houses for families who need it most. Other members have spoke about rent and everything else, but see at the minute, more children are living in the private rented sector than in the social sector. And those children have no stability, no security of tenure. And I know it's a mammoth task, but I think we need a housing summit on behalf of the executive to pull everybody together, get our finest and brightest people and people who've got experience, and to see what else we can do, because this petering on from one mandate to another isn't cutting it for anyone. So support the motion.
Thank you. Call Timothy Gaston.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's quite right to highlight, as this motion does, the critical need for social housing and affordable housing right across Northern Ireland. It is commendable that the Minister has a target to deliver at least 100,000 new homes by 2039, with 33,000 of these social homes as outlined in the Housing Supply Strategy. However, I do have to tell the House that while there is, of course, a need for land to deliver this strategy, a similarly basic requirement is in order for this target to be met, and that is a fit-for-purpose water network. As I have outlined in this House previously, this is where my concern rests. While the Housing Supply Strategy highlights that as a problem and commits to working with Northern Ireland Water to resolve it, there is nothing in its 41 pages to say what the Executive is practically doing to address the matter. Indeed, I have a case with Northern Ireland Water currently that is located within a stone's throw of the main Ballymena wastewater pumping station. The Northern Ireland Water engineering solution to connect 10 new houses requires the developer to run a pipe to a location 3/4 of a mile away, rather than joining into the main sewage pipe at the bottom of the site. This solution makes the site unviable for the developer to build on, and now risks this approved planning application sitting in limbo until the required upgrades are made to the Ballymena wastewater station by Northern Ireland Water. The size of this development is too small for the developer to fund a capital works scheme to fix the issues within the catchment area. But there is a solution that will make the site viable again and help the Minister to meet his new build targets. The solution is for the developer to build an on-site dedicated wastewater treatment works to an adoptable standard. But no, Northern Ireland Water are continuing to drag their heels by sticking to their solution, which costs double that of an on-site solution. If we are serious about meeting the Minister's target, then there needs to be a change of approach by his executive colleagues to delivery. Additionally to the Northern Ireland Water issues, we also have large acres of land locked by zoning for new roads that will never be built. I think of the Ballymena South West Distributor and the Cullybecky bypass in my own constituency. Both roads sitting in plans as they're required to be zoned for road network delivery, but with no possibility of actually being delivered. Indeed, with some joined up thinking, taking Cullybecky as an example, progressing with the new build Cullybecky College would remove the problems in the village traffic-wise, and then the need for the bypass would disappear. That would then release more lands that could be used for housing. One of the fundamental problems with this place is that departments operate in silos with no regard for what others are doing. This is hardly surprising when you consider that politically there is little to unite the Communities and Infrastructure Minister, and the matter which we are debating today is yet another example of the unworkability of Stormont. In fact, what this motion calls for, a public land agency, is something which would be better sitting within the Department of Finance than the Department of Communities. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Now I call the Minister for Communities to respond, and Minister, you have up to 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I thank the mover of the motion and all those that have contributed to the debate, and I welcome the opportunity to respond to it. Through the Housing Supply Strategy and the inclusion of housing as a priority within the programme for government, I have provided a renewed focus on housing during this mandate, and that that must be matched by commitment right across the executive to do things differently. As the House will be aware, the strategy makes a 15-year whole system approach to address the many interconnected issues which impact upon housing supply. One such issue is, of course, the need to identify and release suitable land which could be used to build homes. Plenty of such land is owned by government departments and other public bodies. Much of this land is not being put to any economic use or is being underutilised. I want to change that. I want to use this land to support the provision of social and affordable housing. In the past, the release of land was challenging for landowning departments and agencies, many of whom had poor quality information about their land assets. We knew in general terms there were land assets, but the accurate information needed to properly address the issue was not available. For this reason, my department some years ago initiated the Public Land for Housing project to identify unused and underused land that could be used for housing. This project led directly to the development of the Government Land and Property Register by LPS Services in the Department of Finance, which can be viewed by the public. Taking this work a step further, I'm pleased to support the work of Land and Property Services, who are establishing a new division called the Strategic Asset Management Unit, and that goes live on the 1st of April 2025. And so I'd say to the House today, I am supportive of the intent of the motion, but I think we actually now have something in place that will help us to achieve some of the things that we have mentioned during this debate. But I believe that the creation of a public land agency, which, as Mr Gaston pointed out, would be more appropriate for the Department of Finance than for the Department of Communities, is something that will take more time and energy and actually duplicate what we already have. So for those reasons, I'm supportive of the broader motion and the intent of the motion, but cannot support the idea that we're going to create another agency when we already have bodies in place that can do the work that needs to be done. And this new division will provide support to departments and their arm's-length bodies to enable them to use land and property more effectively, including for housing. And this work will be a key action in my housing supply strategy. I have also recently launched a 5-year pilot with the Housing Executive and local council planning officials. The aim of the pilot, called Housing Executive Land Acquisition, or HELA, is to identify sufficient land to deliver 100 social housing units in areas of acute housing need. I've also worked closely with Belfast City Council to bring forward housing development on DFC and council-owned sites in the city. Now, I have said many times before that budgets are tight. I've also said that we must act differently, and therefore I'm pleased to announce today that it is my intention to bring a paper to the Executive to set out new options for disposal of public land, because I want to maximise delivery with the budget that we have, and using land in a way that supports increasing housing supply is a big part of this. As I've said, I am supportive of the broad intent set out in the motion, and have set out how I and other departments have already taken steps to do what the motion asks, but we cannot support the idea of establishing the Public Land Agency. It would be a complex undertaking, and there are ways to release public land much more quickly and with far less costly administration. Further, this would be a very complex cross-departmental undertaking, and as such, any decision to establish a public land agency would not be mine to give away to the member.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I'm sorry that he won't be supporting our motion. Genuinely, we're not too precious about which department would take this forward, and have come to him as the Minister responsible for social housing and the Minister who's bringing proposals to the Executive on the disposal of public land and how it could be done better. Would the Minister be in a place to share some of those proposals with the Assembly today?
Well, essentially, Mr Deputy Speaker, my concern is that in an era of limited budgets, when we are not able to allocate as much funding to social housing as we might like, you do something new and innovative, and you look at different ways in which you can solve this issue. the whole point of the debate has been for the member to highlight the issue that I'm already working on, which is you need to look at how we can cut costs elsewhere. And for me, if the executive is not able to provide financial resource to me, what can the executive do in terms of the land resource that might be made available? Therefore, I'll be bringing a paper to the executive on new proposals. He will understand that I will be bringing that to the executive first before I tell him, as much as I would like to do that. But it is important that we do look at all of the ways in which we can tackle this issue. So, look, my point is simple. I do not want to support a motion today which will bind the, well, it doesn't bind anybody, but it puts down a marker that this is what the view of the Assembly is, when I don't believe that it is or should be the view of the Assembly that we duplicate what is already in place, that we're putting in an additional layer of administration. I can confirm to the member that I am content with the intent of his motion, but because of this additional issue of the Public Land Agency, it is not something that I am content to support. I do just want to address some of the comments that have been made. Mention again and again has been made of the need for the wastewater infrastructure to be in place. That's absolutely something that I support. It is something that I raised with the previous infrastructure minister. I've asked for a meeting with the current infrastructure minister, following on from commitments that have been made within the housing supply strategy to make sure that we get this right, so that we can talk about this and make progress. I'll very briefly give way to the member.
Thank you for allowing me in. Is the Minister surprised that when we as a committee met with Northern Ireland Water, that Northern Ireland Water confirmed that housing is not part of their priorities? It's only clean water and the provision of that, but they have no intentions of dealing with housing issues?
Well, that's a surprise, and it's also very disappointing, because the strategic direction has been set by the housing supply strategy. Commitments have been made, and there's also a programme for government commitment to dealing with the housing issue. I wasn't aware that those comments had been made, but I look forward to raising that with the Minister in my discussion with her, and that's very useful information. I want to just take a couple of comments that have been made by Carl McCullen. There had been the idea of getting a housing summit together to address some of the issues and to get our best and brightest together. We have already had a very successful roundtable. I think that was back in towards the end of last year, and we're taking forward actions from that. I don't agree with the analysis that in some way we're just bumbling along on this issue. I believe that we have made incredible progress over the last year. We have a plan in place. We have the housing supply strategy that has been agreed by all executive colleagues. That has never happened before. We have a programme for government commitment in place as well, which puts the additional focus on that, and has been mentioned around the chamber today. We are doing new and innovative things in terms of affordable rent, in terms of the 600 homes that were announced last week, that we can actually tackle some of the huge costs that are around temporary accommodation, non-standard in hotels and bed and breakfast. The loan to acquire move-on accommodation, again another use of financial transactions capital in a way that we can actually make a difference and help people get out of the homelessness system. I have bid for and received allocations to increase the number of social homes. We had intended at the beginning of this year to only be able to build 400 social homes. That has gone up to 1,400 completions. So progress is being made. We are moving forward, not as quick as I would like, but I genuinely believe that through the housing supply strategy we have a plan in place for the first time, and I think that that is to be welcomed. Members have mentioned, and I am glad that there's cross-party and cross-community support now in the House for the revitalisation of the housing executive. I believe that that can be a game changer. I have pressed and pressed and pressed on this at every single level, because I genuinely believe that it's one of the most transformational things that we will be able to do during this mandate that can make a real difference and set us up well for the future. So those are I'll give way to Mr. Allen.
It's highlighted pressing on the revitalisation of the housing executive, but yet we haven't achieved that yet. Can you perhaps expand on what the delay is?
Ultimately, this will be a decision for His Majesty's Treasury to confirm what we all believe should happen, which is that there should be a change in how the housing executive is treated in terms of its borrowing. We have made the case, we have provided the information, we have made the arguments at a political level. I do believe that we are moving forward on this. The information that's been requested from us and the answers that we have been able to provide indicates to me that I think that we are moving forward, but I want to make it very, very clear to the UK Government that if they want to do something that's genuinely transformational and can help make a difference, a very, very simple confirmation of change in borrowing rules would do just that, and I look forward to them doing that very, very soon. So I do want to thank everyone for their comments and their contributions to the debate. I thank the mover of the motion in particular. He highlighted the issue of that bunker up in Ballymena. Perhaps he can bring some proposals to the Executive Office for how that can be used. In response to his query, I don't think that we are actively preparing for a nuclear event. If we are, I haven't been informed about it. I don't know if I'm going to have a seat in the bunker or not. If I do, he's more than welcome to have it. If I had to make a choice between being in the bunker with my executive colleagues or taking my chances in the event of a nuclear apocalypse, I know which one that I would rather take. But it is an important point. There is a lot of money that is being used in regards to the maintenance of these buildings, but clearly there are some statutory duties on us as well. But there is an important point, which is we need to make best use of public land. That's certainly something that I want to make sure that we can do. I'm doing that work. I'll continue to do that work so that we can deliver the homes that we also desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for that response. I call Colin McGrath to conclude and wind up the debate on the motion, and you have up to 10 minutes.
Having had some conversations with members of the press, they might think that that bunker is used for executive meetings because they say the lack of information and the lack of press conferences after executive meetings that they are in the dark. Maybe that's where the executive would like to see the press put in that bunker. But I'm glad that we're coming up with some possible uses for it because it's not doing much for anybody if it's lying empty. But there cannot be any more delay, and there cannot be any more inaction, and there can be no more excuses. Our people demand progress to be made on social and affordable housing, and they are rightly demanding that that is now. It's clear that the housing crisis that we are facing has long since reached a critical point. With waiting lists for social housing ballooning to over 47,000, the situation is absolutely nothing short of a crisis. And if there is not action taken urgently, it will be nothing short of a scandal. The number of individuals, and people have referenced these during the debate today, the numbers in temporary accommodation has risen by an alarming 132% over the last 5 years. And I am sure, as people have said, our constituency offices are inundated with people that are coming in dire situations, in a really bad situation. We have distraught mothers, highly stressed and anxious people living in poverty, burnt out families. They're at their wits' end and they are desperate in their pursuit to secure a place to live, and unfortunately they are not getting any assistance or help with that. And then in the private sector, rents are soaring. It now regularly costs more than £1,000 a month in many areas, and people across the north are losing hope and losing faith in the ability of this executive to be able to deliver. And through its inaction, this executive has fed a culture of cynicism that is now embedded in our society. I'd urge anybody to go and walk down any street of any town and say, is the housing crisis being dealt with by our executive? And I think that the majority will have people laughing back at them. Such is the cynicism. And for too many young people, home ownership has become an unrealistic aspiration. Because as wages fail to keep pace with rising house prices, the disparity between income and housing costs is creating an insurmountable barrier for the next generation. As it stands, we are at risk of seeing the social contract being broken and we cannot stand by and let this become the new normal. This motion recognises the critical role that social and affordable housing plays in reducing housing need, supporting communities and strengthening our economy, and presents a pragmatic course of action to resolve our challenges. We must not forget that the Department for Communities has committed to delivering at least 33,000 social homes under the Housing Supply Strategy. The commitment is commendable, but it's this executive, so it's a commitment. When does the commitment become a reality? We must see land being made available if we're going to be able to realise those targets. And that's why the SDLP are proposing something transformative. That's why we recognise the untapped potential of public land, land that is sitting unused or underutilised that is in public ownership. Public land could be, as we have said, the key to unlocking the housing that we need. Our figures show that by just using 10 to 20% of the public estate, we could build between 68,000 and 136,000 new homes. And that's not a far-off dream. It's a very real possibility if we take action now. The need for a more strategic approach to land use cannot be overstated. The public land available for housing development presents an opportunity that should not be overlooked. By using public land, we can build homes faster without the financial burden of expensive land acquisition, and typically accounts for around 30% of the cost of building a social home. So if we don't have that cost of purchasing the land, that is money that could be pumped back in to building homes. By maximising the use of public land, we can free up hundreds of millions of pounds that can be reinvested for further housing development. But to make things happen, of course,
member giving way, but would the member be able to outline or give even just one example of what a public land agency would be able to achieve that the Strategic Asset Management Unit that comes live tomorrow would not be able to?
It would be dedicated to this task, completely dedicated to it and nothing else. If we continue to simply do things the way that we have done things before and shuffle around a few civil servants here, say, lift yourself from that desk and go over to that desk and everything will be solved, then I have no faith that we'll get anything done. I think if we have its own agency that is using the money that would otherwise have been spent otherwise in other ways, we would be able to have that dedicated agency set aside with their own aims, objectives and goals to make sure that they achieve it. The problem is tinkering round the edges is not going to fix the problems that we have. If we actually set up a dedicated unit whose specific job is to do this as an agency, then it would be able to be sorted out. And I remind the member, his own party manifesto says that it would like to see a UK-wide agency. Let's be trailblazers. Let's set the sights up. We'll begin it here, and then others might be able to join in with that. And that's from your own manifesto, was suggesting that we should have such an agency rather than simply having people in doing a different job somewhere else.
The purpose of that, the inclusion of that in the manifesto, clearly on a UK-wide basis, and that's important. But going back to the point that I'm making, and why I actually have supported the work of the Strategic Asset Management Unit, is because it's there for that exact purpose. How do we make sure that we are using land effectively? So why would a public land agency be any different from what's already being created tomorrow? Because surely they would both have the same objectives.
I wonder what sectors will be brought in to work with this agency alongside them. I wonder what experts will be brought in to sit inside a department at the desks alongside these people to be able to do the job. I would probably guess none of them, because if it's a civil service-led project, it will be filled with civil servants pushing papers around to try and do civil service things. If we have an agency that can reach out and bring construction experts in, it can bring in experts from outside of the field to do the work alongside them, then we might get more done. I think we're going to fundamentally disagree on this one. You have a unit that you say is going to save all of the issues of social housing, and it's starting tomorrow. If we're not supported here today and that's what we get tomorrow, we're watching. And we will watch and see how successful it is. I just fear that because we're doing exactly what we've done before with other issues with the civil service, that we may get the same outcome, and that's where we are at the minute, with very little happening in terms of the House. And that's why we're calling for the creation of a public land agency, a body that will be responsible for identifying the land, working across departments and partnering with housing associations. I don't know how many times I have spoke to housing associations who have told us that the biggest thing that they can't get is land. And that's housing associations that are there today, that can tap in and out of the civil service and the department to try and get work done, and we go nowhere. And yet we have huge amounts of land that can be used. That's why we were suggesting that there would be a separate agency that would deal with that. It's obvious that it's not going to get the support of the department. What I suppose is there was a sense that it should be part of another department if it was going to take place, and that again really just gets to some of the point of what we do. You get one minister saying, no, we don't want anything to do with it, pass it over to another minister. Then you get another minister who says, oh, it's nothing to do with my department, could it not be somebody else that deals with it? And it's that merry-go-round that we go, where we go round and round and round, but there's never any action. So we are proposing that this land agency is there. We think a separate, purely dedicated agency in its own right, with its own staff, reaching out and bringing in the sector and working with them, will be better than another down the corridor door where the nameplate is changed. And that's why we have proposed this motion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, the question is that the motion standing on the order paper be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary of any no. I think the ayes probably have it. Okay, members, given that question time is scheduled for 2 p.m. and that we're going to divide on this question, we will then divide on the question when we resume, when question time is finished. So the next item of business in the order paper is question time. I therefore propose by leave of the Assembly to suspend the sitting until 2 p.m. The sitting is by leave suspended.